Hello and welcome to One on One. I'm Vernon Ramazan. I have to say we're honoured today to have in our presence His Excellency Gauri Shankar Gupta, the High Commissioner of India. Your Excellency, welcome to the programme once again. And you're here on a very sort of auspicious occasion because on October the 2nd, it marks the 145th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. And I thank you very much for coming in to talk about his life and his legacy.
First of all, let me thank you profoundly for inviting me once again. It has always been a pleasure talking to you on variety of subjects. And this time, this is a great subject. We are celebrating 145th anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi, a man whom I call a Yug Purush in Hindi. That is, a man like him are born only once in thousands of years. He was a man which practiced what he taught. He says that if you want to do something, be the agent of the change you want to see. So he himself practiced what he preached and what he taught throughout his life. But if we go to the main message of Mahatma Gandhi and its relevance today, his foundation was Satya, Ahimsa, Prem. These three words in Hindi. Satya means the truth, Ahimsa means non-violence, and Prem means love. He put them together, that be truthful, be honest in your work, whatever you do in your life. Don't do any harm to anybody else. Don't even think of doing any harm to anybody else. That is the non-violence he has defined. And extend your love to everybody. So this is what his philosophy was. And you know, using that philosophy, he was able to shake the foundation of the British Empire on which the sun never set that time. As I often say that the man with these three principles was able to throw that empire out of India without a single bullet being fired. So you can imagine the enormous strength that man could inspire among the masses of people.
And people can of course not forget that India was a jewel in the crown. It was
of course,
the linchpin of the empire.
India was the largest colony. It was the most prosperous colony, because before the British came to India, they came to India because India was the most attractive center of production. At that time, in 15th, 16th century, India controlled almost 40% of the total world trade. And that is why the Europeans were keen to travel to India and to discover India, because it was called what you call a golden bird. And there was a race for discovering India and controlling India. So naturally it was the jewel in the crown of the British Empire. And this man transformed his own life through certain experiences in South Africa. If you look at his evolution of his life, he was from Gujarat, coming from a trading class. He went to England, took the law education and became a barrister. That time, getting this kind of education in England and becoming barrister was one of the great things. He could have been easily happy with all the what you call perks of life and privileges of life. He could have earned enough and lived in a very lavish style. But then he went to South Africa. He experienced what you call discrimination based on apartheid, based on color. Color of your skin means you are entitled to this, you are not entitled to this. And when he was thrown out of the first class apartment in which he was traveling, because he was not a white, he was a brown colored man, that changed his whole life. From then onwards, he decided that he is not going to accept injustice on its face value.
He spent 20 years in South Africa, didn't he?
He lived almost 20 years there. He practiced there and he mobilized opinion against apartheid. And actually in 1915, he came back to India. Next year we will have 100 years of his return to India. And then he became the leader of Indian freedom movement. He launched, as we call Satyagraha, a movement based on the basis of truth, justice and non-violence. That was his principle. he mobilized opinion of millions of people against the British and demonstrated that through peaceful means he was able to shake their foundation in India.
Now, one of the reasons I love having you on is you speak not just as a High Commissioner, but also as a writer and a poet. So you have a sort of a different way of viewing the world. There have been so many sort of sages throughout history who've had ideas about nonviolence and about love and things like that. But obviously there was something special about Gandhi that really galvanized people. What was it that made him such a unique figure in history?
You know, he actually practiced what he said. First of all, as I told you, he could have lived a very lavish lifestyle, but he lived the most Spartan lifestyle. The way he wore, what he wore, the way he ate, he was absolutely simple. He identified himself with the message by using that.
Because
But nobody could identify with the message.
And being an educated person, educated in England, he would have been normally at that point wearing a suit, but he chose to wear traditional Indian peasant garb.
Exactly. And he lived in the way the rural people in India lived. He went to their toilets and taught them how to clean the toilets. He himself cleaned their toilets. He educated them about the legal system. He educated them about the oppressions the British were perpetrating on India. So, the most important part for him was identifying himself with the masses of India, living the way the masses lived, talked the language the masses talked, behaved the way they talked, and that made him the leader of the masses, and that really transformed. And then his practical experience, his practical way of giving people his own love, loving everybody, whether even his greatest enemy he loved. Because he says, I can have a difference of opinion with you, but I have no reason to hate you. And that is what he practiced. And that brought the people, to accept him as the leader. And that is why there was no leader of masses in India in the recent time except Mahatma Gandhi. He really became the leader of the masses.
I mean, he walked in the footsteps of the people.
Yes.
And yet, in turn, they chose to walk in his footsteps in his march.
Exactly.
In one of the perhaps the greatest historical events of our time.
I think it is indeed the greatest historical event of the last 2 centuries. In fact, in the history of India, if you look at various great people, I think after Buddha he comes the next. And Buddha was 2600 years back in time. So that is how I look at the history of mankind, because he made a change. Let me read out one of his great, not philosophical, but a very practical tip, which he calls 7 sins of Mahatma Gandhi. When I was ambassador to Mongolia, we installed a statue of Mahatma Gandhi there in the capital town of Ulaanbaatar. And then I decided to install these 7 sins along with that. So these, let me read them out.
By all means.
They are really worth emulating. He says, wealth without work. If you earn wealth without doing the work, it is a sin. And pleasure without conscience, all the pleasures you draw without having the inner conscience, it's a sin. Knowledge without character, commerce without morality, science without humanity, religion without sacrifice, and politics without principle. He says one must avoid these 7 sins in life. Then the life would be much better. The humanity as a whole will benefit if we can follow these principles even today.
And they make all of them make perfect sense. And I think within the context of the world, the last one, politics without principle, is something that I think guides the world now. People expect principles in politics, even if we don't necessarily always get it.
You see, today the religion is being used for perpetrating killings around the world. He is saying the religion without sacrifice. There is no religion if you can't sacrifice. Commerce is being used to dominate the world, to shake the countries sometimes. Now he says commerce without morality is a sin. Science without humanity. Now we are making progress in science, but some of the progress we are making is actually destroying the humanity as a whole. So these are the lessons which we should learn, and this is also true. Wealth without work. If you become very wealthy without working for it, you tend to lose your character. You can observe people who have become very wealthy without working for it. They lose their conscience inside and they lose their character. And so these are actually the highlights of his message.
Oh, whenever you talk about Mahatma Gandhi and the concept of work, obviously the spinning wheel comes to mind. And the spinning wheel also reflected in modern day India's flag. What was the relevance and the significance of that to Gandhi?
You have asked a very, very fantastic question. People wonder what was the relevance of it. You see, his relevance was that he always emphasized that every village of India should be autonomous in terms of its own economy. You should not go out for importing anything for the village. The village should be self-sufficient. You grow your own food, you grow your own vegetable, you make your own clothings, you make your own houses, and whatever necessities you have, you should be self-sufficient in the village. Now the charkha, the spinning wheel, was the symbol of that thing. He told people that you must spin your own thread to weave your clothes. Don't import it from anywhere else. This was also a protest against the British, because that was the time when the British started importing what you call machine-made clothing from UK to India.
Because we had mercantilism in effect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then that started destroying a large number of jobs in India. So that was another reason he used that. But the primary reason he used it was that each village should be self-sufficient. And he also insisted that we should develop the small and rural industries which provide employment to the people, which keep them occupied. Today we have these large manufacturing units which are basically based on what you call assembly lines. Mm-hmm. Everybody is doing a repetitive job sitting on that line whole day, 8 hours a day. One person is only putting one thing from one point to another point. These kind of assembly line units, as I call them, dehumanizing the humanity. Because if you work repetitively in the same mechanical way, 8 hours a day, 365 days in a year, your mental growth is retarded. You are not able to think properly. You are not able to innovate. Your ideology as a human being is reduced to that mechanics.
It's almost soul destroying.
It is basically a robot in flesh and blood. And that is what the modern industry has done to the human being. That is why these people, after 8 hours of work, they go and they take shelter of alcohol. Because the human values are slowly disappearing in the process. So he was emphasizing that the mass manufacturing, these large industries, will destroy humanity, and which is happening now. It is time that we come back to the small and rural industries. It will provide employment, it will give an occupation to the person so that they will keep away from the criminal activities, they will keep away from alcohol, they will keep away from other bad habits of life. It will also not allow us to have concentration of wealth. Today we have these large big industries. Now these industries naturally leads to concentration of wealth and means of production. One person becomes billionaire because he has all these big manufacturing facilities around the world with distribution system. This has led to concentration of wealth in a tremendous way. Today one individual in this world owns more than 48 nations put together own. 48 countries put together don't have as much as one individual does. Mm-hmm. So this kind of concentration has taken place because of this mass manufacturing which has happened. So that is why the charkha, the spinning wheel of Gandhi, and his principle of self-sufficiency for each village is very, very important. And I guess to bring back the humanity, to bring back the values of human life.
And it really is his humanity above all that makes him a great person, doesn't it? I mean, he was a great figure in India and internationally, remains a great figure, but he was most of all a human with his own frailties who was happy to walk amongst the people, which I think is a lesson for all politicians. You should never be above the people that you're governing or the people you're leading.
Exactly, he never felt like governing. He was a servant of the people. He always went there, even when India was divided against all his wishes between the
That was a
between
great
India and
heartbreak, the
Pakistan.
partition of India, wasn't it?
He went to all those places personally where there were riots between Hindus and Muslims and between Sikhs and Muslims. He visited those areas. He lived with those people. He pacified them. This is not the way you should be doing. He took the risk of his own life, and in fact, ultimately he became victim in the process. But he went there. He lived with the message. He never ruled anything. He never wanted any official position. Even after independence, he said nothing. He never had that greed of power. He only gave through his example, through his own behavior, what he wanted to give to the people. And that was the greatest sacrifice you can see of any leader in the world. To keep away from power is not easy thing. It's power is a great attraction. Prestige is a great attraction. He didn't believe in all that. He really lived in austerity. He lived a life of detachment, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, detachment. He was detached from power. He was detached from prestige. He was detached from wealth. He was detached from amenities. So he lived that real life of sacrifice. It's not easy to find a man like him.
Was the partition his greatest heartbreak, do you think? The partition of India?
The greatest?
His greatest heartbreak in his life?
I think he once said that the India will be partitioned over my dead body. And I don't know how he accepted. Ultimately, he died as a result of it. Almost it was a partition over his dead body, almost. Because we became independent in August 47 and he was assassinated in January 48. So that's what happened. He was...
Because he had a vision of a whole India, and India as one with different people, which is why I guess modern day India is, of course, the world's largest secular state, isn't it? And that was part of his vision, that we can all live together if we don't emphasize our differences.
Exactly, because he never believed that there should be any constitution of a country on the basis of religion. He thought the religion means you can sacrifice for others. Religion for him meant something good, not bloodshed. And that is why in the sins I read out just now, he says religion means sacrifice. Without sacrifice, there is no religion. And he could never think of a partition of a country on the basis of religion. For him, Hindu, Muslim, Jews and Christians, they were all together. They were all the same human beings. He believed in the human religion, not in the religion of the books.
What do you think Gandhi would think, looking at India, modern day India, as his initial vision of what India was to be, which, as you mentioned, was about rural communities and self-sufficiency, and this behemoth of an industrial giant that we have that is now modern day India?
I think it's very difficult to answer this question, but I feel that he will feel sad today because in India we also are having a material race today. A race towards more and more wealth, which is against his philosophy, against his personal conduct. He wanted a sort of moderation in life, which Buddha also propagated. That poverty is a curse, but at the same time, too much wealth is also a curse. There should be a balance in life. And he was propagating that balance. But today, we have a problem in India that some people in India have become very, very rich. A large number of people are comparatively poor. I think we need to bridge that gap. That gap is the biggest problem India is facing today. We need to bring up the so-called middle class in larger number with redistribution of wealth. I think the rich people should themselves come forward as a part of their social responsibility to share their wealth, because Gandhi gave another principle of trusteeship. His principle of trusteeship was that if you are rich, your riches is a trust for the rest of the humanity, and therefore you should share with everybody. Like he was very close to the house of the Birlas, but he considered that Birlas will share their wealth with everybody else. He considered that wealth as trust of all the people of India. Now that principle should come back in India, particularly for those who are extremely rich. They should be able to share their prosperity with the poor who are still struggling to make their 2 square meals a day.
Because that is sort of a hallmark of modern day India. You've got people with unbelievable amounts of wealth who seem to sort of have blinders on to the poverty that exists, which is something that Gandhi himself chose not. As you mentioned, he could have been a very wealthy lawyer with his British degree, but he chose to not pursue that and to work to help others. But now we have people with blinders on who choose to ignore others.
I think
not
today,
just in India, but in other countries as well.
Today we need more people like Mahatma Gandhi, because not only in India, everywhere in the world the disparity of income and wealth is going up. On the one hand, you have large slums. According to World Health Organization, approximately 1.2 billion people in this world are living in urban slums. They are born in poverty. They have no education, no supplies, they live in poverty as a result, and they die in poverty. Ignorance and poverty is their destiny from birth to death. Imagine 1.2 billion people living in urban slums alone. Then if you look at the disparity, in fact I was just looking at the World Development Report, which is published by the World Bank every year. So it has just come out, I think about a month ago or so, the development report for 2013. They are saying that 89% of the people today are living with less than $10 a day. 89% of the people live less than $10 a day. Now $10 means that includes their rental for the accommodation, their transport, their food, their clothing, their education, medicine, whatever they have to need. That is the bigger figure. But they also give a figure that 65% of the people live with less than $2.5 a day. Oh. Now that is the disparity, the scale of disparity we are experiencing today in this world, despite tremendous growth in the world's GDP over the years. If you look at the growth of GDP of the world as a whole after Second World War, it must have grown at least 100 times, at least.
But we haven't addressed inequity.
At the same time,
at
the same time, the poverty has grown many, many times.
Your Excellency, so this is a subject for another day perhaps, because we're almost out of time. And I know you wanted to mention what the High Commission will be doing to commemorate Mahatma Gandhi's birthday. Obviously, there will be the statue in Port of Spain.
Yes, we have planned 3 events. One event will be in the morning at 9:30 at the statue of Mahatma Gandhi in Port of Spain, where Honorable Speaker Ved Mark will be the chief guest and he will deliver the address. We will pay flower tribute to Gandhi, and followed by some of what we call bhajans, the devotional songs which were very dear to him. Then we have a function in San Fernando, which is in the afternoon around 4:30, to pay tribute to the Mahatma Gandhi's statue there. That is being organized by the Gandhi Seva Sangh. And then we have a cultural evening in the Mahatma Gandhi Cultural Center in Chagwanaj. That will start at 6:30, where Foreign Minister Winston Dukaran is our chief guest. He will be delivering the feature address, and the Mayor of Chagwanaj will also be guest of honor. We are hoping to get a good number of people for this cultural event at 6:30. We will tried to put up certain programs which are dear to Mahatma Gandhi during that performance. So this is how we propose to celebrate in Port of Spain. In addition, the government of India has decided to launch a campaign for cleanliness, Swachhta Abhiyan. That is, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has decided that we should clean India physically in the next few years as per the dreams of Mahatma Gandhi. Because Mahatma Gandhi was a great believer of cleanliness. As I mentioned before, he himself went to the toilets of the poor people and taught them how to clean the toilets. He himself cleaned them. And therefore, this campaign to clean India is extremely important.
Would be near and dear to his heart.
Yes, so we will launch this campaign also in the High Commission formally on 2nd of October.
Well, Your Excellency, we're completely out of time, but I want to thank you so much for coming in and shedding some light on the life of a man who has really and truly transformed the world in so many ways. A great pleasure as always having you on.
Before I end, I would like to add one more thing.
Sure.
That his birthday is also now celebrated as International Non-Violence Day. This has been declared by the United Nations a few years ago. So this will also be observed as International Non-Violence Day.
And time to think in
And
those terms.
I think it will provide people a new occasion to introspect and think how we can, overcome this violence which is spreading around the world in the name of religion, in the name of sectarian disputes, in the name of disparity in the wealth, in the name of variety of other issues. I think this is an occasion which will give us time to
very
introspect and take some steps.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. A pleasure having
Thank
you
you
on the
very
program.
much, Vernon. It has always been a pleasure meeting you.
Thank you. You're always
and-
welcome on the
thank you,
program.
thank you,
Thank you.
thank
You've been watching One on One. Join us again tomorrow for another edition.